Hello guys, hope that you are good. Today we are going to start a new lecture series about data. What is data? What are the types of data? What are the different sources of data? Data is actually a set of values of qualitative and quantitative variables. You know that there are two important variables. One is qualitative variable, the second one is quantitative variable. Qualitative variable is any variable whose properties are that they are observed but that cannot be measured with a numerical result. So qualitative variable cannot be measured with a numerical result. For example, behavior, level of intelligence, these are qualitative properties. Quantitative properties is any property or any variable that have a numerical characteristics that can be measured numerically, like age, color, temperature. Age can take any numerical value, while temperature also have any type of numerical value. So data is actually a set of values of qualitative and quantitative variable. Remember, in research process or in research, data is always collected or measured, and after data collection, that data is analyzed statistically and then reported. So what are the types of data? There are two basic types of data. One is primary data, the second one is secondary data. Primary data is actually new information collected directly by researcher by means of experimentation. So primary data are collected for the first time by the researcher through research study or experimentation. So primary data is the type of data which is collected for the first time by the researcher by means of experimentation. While secondary data is actually public or existing information collected by other researchers. So the data which had already been collected by other researchers. So two types of data, primary data, secondary data. Primary data is new information, is new type of data which is collected by means of experimentation. Secondary data is already collected data by means of the experiment, by means of experimentation. And now that data is actually the public or existing information. Now, what are the basic difference between primary and secondary data? This is primary data, this is secondary data. Primary data is actually the data originated for the first time by the researcher. These data is actually collected for the first time by the researcher. While secondary data, the already existing data collected by earlier by other researchers. So first time primary data is actually the first hand information. There is real time data or first hand information. Secondary data relates to the first or second hand information which is already available, or actually secondary data is the existing information. Primary data is collected for addressing the problem at hand. This is actually this type of data is collected by identifying a research problem, while secondary data collected for the purpose other than the problem at hand. So these are actually the existing information, the already available information which can be available for any task. Uh, Data collection in case of primary data, it takes long process. The collection of primary data takes long process, while secondary data collection process is quick and it is easy as compared to primary data. Primary data actually required large amount of resources. The primary data collection required large amount of resources such as times, manpower, and cost. Secondary data, it is relatively inexpensive and quickly available information. Remember, primary data is always specific to the researcher needs. The primary data, they are always specific to the researcher need, while secondary data may or may not be specific to the researcher need. This is quite expensive because a large amount of resources are required for its collection. You can utilize, the researcher utilize their times, the manpower will be utilized, and also the collection of data is a costly operation. While it is only the searching of the relevant literature, so it is an economical way of collection of secondary information. Primary data required need trained people is required for collection of the primary data, while it is not necessary to collect secondary data. So primary data requires certain trained people for its collection. Primary data is always available in raw form, while secondary data, it is the refined form of primary data. Raw form of data means, raw data means this is actually unprocessed data, which is neither clean, corrected, nor statistically analyzed. So primary information is available in raw form. Raw form means these are the unprocessed information, which is neither corrected, neither clean, nor analyzed statistically. While secondary data is obtained when statistical method is applied to the primary data, when statistical when raw form of data is passed through statistical analysis, then it becomes the secondary data. Then we call that is a refined form of data or processed data. Primary data is collected through primary sources. The primary data which is collected through sources is called primary sources of data collection, while secondary information are collected through secondary sources. So what are the primary sources of data collection? The primary sources of data collection include control experiments, they include case studies, surveys, questionnaires, observation, interviews. These are the primary sources through which we can collect primary information, while secondary sources are those sources through which we can collect secondary information, like government publications, websites, book, journal articles, research papers, review papers. All these are under the secondary sources of the data. So these are the basic difference between primary and secondary data. Actually, primary data is always available in raw form. Raw form means this is the unprocessed data, in which cannot pass through statistical softwares for data analysis. When raw form of the data is processed statistically, then they are converted into process or refined form, and that we call secondary data. So all these about the primary and secondary data. Thank you.